I don't know if you know this, but I'm a huge fan of wrestling entertainment. Growing up, I played a ton of wrestling games. For example, Warzone and Attitude for the PS1. Even moving on to the next generation with the PS2 era with SmackDown vs. Raw. All games I want to cover on the channel someday. But out of all these games, one that really stood out to me was Def Jam Vendetta. If you haven't checked it out yet, I have a retrospective on it and you might enjoy it. Playing Def Jam Vendetta was something magical. The game had charm, was a blast to play, and was brutal in all the right ways. Fans loved it even though it seemed to come out of nowhere. No one expected it to be such a hit, but when you do something great the first time, it's only a matter of time before you need to do it again. Def Jam took that magic and created a true cult classic, a game that shines for anyone who played it. Welcome back to the Retro Fans Retrospective. I hope you're iced out and ready to hit the scene when Def Jam fight for New York. If you're just discovering this channel, you're in for a treat. We got a growing catalog of captivating retrospectives that peel back the layers of gaming's most fascinating and influential titles. From unsung gems to celebrated classics, our deep dives offer fresh perspectives that'll ignite your passion for the art form. If you enjoy an engaging retrospective that blends insightful analysis with reverence for its subject matter, mash the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss out on upcoming exploration to the brilliant minds and landmark experiences that have shaped this incredible medium. Let's dive into this. If you haven't already, be sure to check out my retrospective on Def Jam Vendetta to get up to speed on the backstory behind Def Jam and Electronic Arts. Now, let's continue. Def Jam Vendetta was a surprise hit. Neither EA nor his game's producer Josh Holmes from EA Canada expected to develop such a huge fan base. The game was a risk from the start. In an interview with GameSpot, Holmes admitted, "The original Vendetta was a big gamble, merging hip-hop and fighting. We felt confident that there was an audience out there for the game, but until it was released, we couldn't be sure. Looking back as a team, we were all proud of the end result." Initially, its sequel was set to be titled Def Jam Vendetta 2, but as development moved forward, the game was changed to Def Jam Fight for New York to reflect its evolution and location. With Def Jam Vendetta being such a hit, it was only natural for another entry in the series to follow. But to make this next game even more successful, the development team took a unique approach. You don't often see this. They conducted research directly from the audience. Their goal was to upgrade the mechanics from Def Jam Vendetta while also drawing in new players. According to Josh Holmes, they found that veteran Aki players picking up Def Jam Vendetta found the controls familiar, but new players were often intimidated by the complexity. So both Aki and EA aimed to not only evolve the fighting system, but also introduce something fresh. Part of their research involved watching fight scenes from movies and hardcore fighting competitions, helping them compile a huge list of ideas. Whether it was smashing a pool cue over an opponent's head, dragging someone's face across a chain-like fence, running up a chest to deliver a kick to the chin, or hurling someone through a car window, they wanted to make sure it was all possible in the game. What's fascinating is how they expanded the roster to include over 40 rappers and celebrities. Many artists from the previous game returned to reprise their roles, and their involvement was beyond just lending their likeness. These artists gave input on everything: costumes, dialogue, fighting, you name it. They were hands-on with all aspects. When it came to the game's story, which was a major highlight, Method Man actually collaborated with Josh Holmes to develop the narrative. Holmes explained in an interview, "This year we brought story mode back, but we've improved it dramatically. It's 3 times the length of the original and features more than 6 times the amount of story content. It's no longer linear. You decide the path you take through the story, making choices along the way. The choices you make actually impact the story." The game's design mechanics were meticulously crafted, featuring natural flowing hair, detailed blood and sweat effects, and even jewelry that sparkled under the lights. The environments were interactive, with crowds that could react to the action and weapons scattered throughout. To build hype for the latest installment, producer Keith Moore spoke in an interview about the game's new engine and how it raised the bar from the original. Monroe highlighted the improvements in the mechanics and visuals, emphasizing how this new entry aimed to elevate the series to new heights.
Alors voilà, là on est dans le coin Electronic Arts et grâce à Karine, on va pouvoir discuter avec Who Are You?
Keith Monroe.
Avec Keith Monroe qui est en fait le producteur de Def Jam 2. So tell us a bit about Def Jam.
Def Jam Fight for New York is a sequel to Def Jam Vendetta. It's coming out this fall on the PlayStation, Xbox, and GameCube, and PlayStation 2. And what it is, it's actually a totally revamped engine where it's a total fighting game, not a wrestling game like the original title. And we've got over 90 fights in the storyline, so that's actually 3 times the length of the original game. So it's totally awesome. We heard loud and clear from our consumers that the first game was a little bit short, so we want to make this a really long, deep experience.
Alors, ils viennent nous dire que le dernier, on lui avait reproché d'être trop court. Il y avait une trentaine de batailles, il y en a 90. Il arrive sur PlayStation 2, GameCube, Xbox, toutes les machines. Mais surtout, ce n'est plus un jeu de catch, c'est vraiment un jeu de fight, de street fight. Ça se passe dans les rues et le moteur a été complètement revu à la hausse pour l'occasion. So tell us a bit more about this new street fighting engine.
Sure. Well, the new engine from Aki, the developer, actually is a combination of 5 different fighting styles, so it's pretty sweet. So not only can you do kickboxing, martial arts, wrestling, submissions, also street fighting. And within the martial arts, there are many different styles as well, like Kung Fu, Karate, Shaolin, Aikido, things like that.
Alors, en fait, le nouveau moteur qui est fait par Aki, le développeur, propose plusieurs styles de combat. C'est vrai qu'on a bien sûr les arts martiaux avec du kung-fu et plein d'autres types d'arts martiaux et en fait des choses à emprunter un petit peu à plein de sortes de styles de combat. Ce n'est pas qu'un style de combat, c'est 5 sortes de combat avec autant de variantes derrière. So you're saying there's a lot of moves in this new one?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, what's really unique is that you can combine the different fighting styles to create your own hybrid fighting style within the game. So when you create your player, you'll be able to decide what kind of moves you like best, what's most powerful for you, what's the coolest thing for you, and implement those moves in the game.
Alors on a aussi la possibilité de créer son propre joueur et quand on le fait, de faire des sortes de personnages hybrides qui vont tout simplement emprunter aux différents styles d'arts martiaux et donc de créer un personnage complètement original. I need to know, Fight for New York, why?
Actually, the storyline, which is a 90-fight storyline, takes place in and out of New York. So it really is a battle between 2 competing forces, the forces of good and the forces of evil, if you will, for control of hip-hop's underworld, which takes place in New York City.
Alors l'histoire se déroulera à New York, c'est en fait les gentils et les méchants qui veulent contrôler le monde de la hip-hop underground. How does Snoop Doggy Dogg play into this?
Snoop Dogg plays a character called Crow. And Crow is the bad boss, the baddest boss of the evil side, so to speak. So you are playing a hero that basically is out to take down Crow, who has taken over New York City.
Alors donc le but, puisque Snoop Dogg il vient nous le dire, en fait, joue tout simplement un personnage qui s'appelle Crow, qui est le chef des méchants. Donc vous, en créant votre personnage, le boss final, ce sera Snoop Dogg.
With all the hype built for the game, they were set for a great release, as on September 21st, 2004, the world was given Def Jam Fight for New York.
Money, power, respect. That's what our code is all about.
Forget the code.
Here's a quick spoiler, as I'm about to tell the story of Def Jam Fight for New York. Also, there will be light spoilers for Def Jam Vendetta. Now, if you're not a fan of spoilers, please advance this video to the gameplay overview section as seen on the timeline. Let's dive into this. The story picks up right where Def Jam Vendetta left off, after the protagonist defeats D-Mob and walks away with Angel. The scene opens with D-Mob being arrested at the arena, handcuffed and thrown into the back of a cop car. Just when it seems like he's headed for jail, the car gets T-boned and someone helps D-Mob escape from the wreckage. The cop on duty begins to piece things together, matching mugshots and sketches of the person who helped D-Mob break free. We then cut to D-Mob's hideout where Redman, aka Doc, is napping while Sticky Fingers and Method Man, also known as Blaze, are locked in a video game battle. After some playful taunting between Sticky and Blaze, D-Mob bursts in, bringing with him the protagonist, the same person the cops were sketching. D-Mob wastes no time scolding Blaze and Sticky for leaving him for dead, and Blaze quickly questions whether the protagonist can hold his own. To prove himself, the protagonist steps into the training arena, impressing Blaze and D-Mob, though Sticky remains skeptical. Blaze, now convinced, offers the protagonist a place to stay since he's a wanted man, and so begins his journey, fighting to help D-Mob rebuild his fallen empire.
Not bad. Looks like you've seen a few scraps in your time.
Whatever, man. Sparring ain't shit. 10-1 this bitch get knocked out in a real fight.
There's only one way to find out. Go buy yourself some new gear. If you're gonna run with this crew, you better look the part. Think you can handle that?
Hey, listen, the cops are looking for you, so you can't go back to your pad. It ain't much, but it's yours for as long as you need it.
It's got potential.
Blaze reaches out to the protagonist, informing him that D-Mob wants him to start making a name for himself in the club scene. After a string of victories, the protagonist catches the eye of several potential girlfriends, including Cindy J, Kimura, Lil Kim, and Shawana. Choosing one, he must defeat her overprotective boyfriend in a fight before walking out of the club with her by his side. As he continues to rise in the ranks, he ends up at Club 357 where he faces off against Ice-T. After defeating Ice-T, the protagonist joins D-Mob, Blaze, and Sticky at a table. But their moment of triumph is interrupted when a rival faction led by Snoop Dogg known as Crow approaches. Alongside him is Crack, played by Fat Joe, Magic, played by Busta Rhymes, and Trejo, played by Danny Trejo. Crow wastes no time in taunting the protagonist and even challenges him to a fight with Crack. He boldly threatens to take over D-Mob's territory and tempts the fighters with promise of more money if they join him. His unexpected appearance leaves everyone at the table stunned and on edge, knowing the battle for control is just beginning.
Yo, look who's here.
Well, if it ain't America's Most Wanted, that police composite don't do justice to your ugly face. Shut your mouth. Thought your boy might want some real competition. Crack could use the exercise.
What are you doing here, Crow?
Oh, you know, just thought I'd come by and see how my new club is doing. Just a matter of time before we take this place over.
You better watch your step.
Uh-oh, I think I offended him. Hey, let's bounce, fellas. Oh, one more thing. Any fighters here that want to make some real money, you best join up with me before it's too late. Thanks for the hospitality. See you soon.
After taking down several of Crow's fighters in the circuit, the protagonist gets a call from D-Mob to meet up for a crew meeting. The gathering includes the protagonist, Blaze, D-Mob, Ludacris, and Capone, with Doc unsurprisingly asleep on the couch. Blaze expresses his concerns about losing ground to Crow, just as Sticky walks in late and immediately complains about his seat. D-Mob quickly shuts him down, putting him in his place. Sticky suggests a more aggressive, guns-blazing approach to take down Crow, but D-Mob dismisses it, insisting that the brute force isn't the way. Instead, D-Mob lays out a plan to regain respect by systematically taking down Crow's fighters and winning back the clubs. He tasks Blaze with taking out Crack, which Blaze is more than eager to do. This strategy strengthens D-Mob's plan to slowly but surely rebuild his fallen empire.
Man, even with the clubs my man's managed to take for us, we still losing out to Crow.
You're late.
You on my seat.
Sit your ass down.
Don't get too comfortable.
Yo, so what's the plan?
I say fuck Crow. We go in there strapped and lay his ass out once and for all.
Wrong. We do that, and they're just gonna hit us back. What does that solve? We start shooting up the streets and the cops will be all over us. How are we gonna make money with all that heat?
So we supposed to just roll over and let Crow piss in our backyard?
Listen, Crow thinks fear is power, but he's wrong. A beaten dog may fear you, but the second you turn your back, he's gonna strike. Real power comes from respect. That's what our code is all about. We win Crow's clubs, and he won't have a leg to stand on. So, next step. Blaze, you're gonna go up against Crack.
You got it, D. I'll fold that bitch up like an old wallet.
Blaze goes head to head with Crack, but unfortunately he takes the loss. Soon after, Crow calls the protagonist, taunting him about Blaze's defeat and trying to lure him away from D-Mob's crew with promises of a better deal. The protagonist presses on, and after a few more fights he faces Dub C, securing a victory and reclaiming another club for D-Mob's side. Crow makes another appearance, but this time his tone, though still sarcastic, is more measured. He issues a direct challenge to D-Mob, saying this back and forth is dragging them both down. The only way to settle things, Crow claims, is with one final fight, Crack versus D-Mob's best fighter. D-Mob accepts the challenge and selects the protagonist to take down Crack, a decision that doesn't sit well with Sticky. Offended by being passed over, Sticky makes his displeasure known and ultimately leaves D-Mob's crew. Crow, never one to miss a chance, taunts D-Mob as he walks away. The tension between the two factions reaches a boiling point, setting the stage for an explosive showdown.
You came through for us again.
Looks like my man just took another one of your clubs, Crow.
That's what I want to talk to you about. Man, this war is costing us both too much money. You know it, and I know it.
What are you suggesting? A truce?
Something much more interesting. A fight. Winner takes all.
And the loser?
The loser? Hell, I don't know. Loser goes to Jersey.
Who are the principals?
My boy Crack versus your best man.
Yeah, and I'll make him bleed. Just ask Blaze. He remembers me.
Alright, you're on.
So who's it gonna be?
My partner right here.
What? Man, this is bullshit!
You better watch yourself.
Nah, man, you better watch yourself! I'm out of here.
Looks like you got yourself a little morale issue there, brother. See you Friday.
Don't worry about Sticky. You just be ready.
As the protagonist prepares for his fight against Crack, Crow taunts him, warning him that he's making a huge mistake by taking on Crack tonight. Ignoring the threat, the protagonist and his girlfriend head to the fighting arena, accompanied by Blaze and D-Mob as they approach the octagon. The fight is intense, but the protagonist manages to take down Crack, securing the victory. Crow, having lost his own challenge, leaves the area in defeat. The group celebrates by heading off in a limo, where D-Mob rewards the protagonist with his very own Vendetta chain for his loyalty and skill. But as they pull up to a red light, Trejo and Magic appear on a car beside them and open fire on the limo. A chaotic chase ensues, ending in a crash. Both cars collide. The attackers flee into a nearby subway station, and it's here where the true betrayal is revealed. Sticky has turned against D-Mob and joined forces with Crow. Sticky escapes from the subway, leaving the protagonist to face Trejo in a brutal fight at the station, marking the real beginning of the war between the two factions.
You did good. Look, we got a lot of work to do. But first, I want you to have something. This is to show you how much I appreciate what you've done for us. Now, your family.
Wait! Don't do it, man! Say goodbye, bitch. Goodbye, bitch.
After the fight, the protagonist returns to D-Mob and Blaze, only to learn that D-Mob was hit during the drive-by. Fueled by anger, the protagonist vows to take revenge on Crow, but D-Mob, even in his weakened state, urges him not to act recklessly. With D-Mob getting arrested, the weight of the fight falls on Blaze and the protagonist. Blaze, keeping a level head, tells the protagonist that the best way to strike back at Crow is taking over his turf and beating his fighters. With their crew smaller and their leader behind bars, it's up to the remaining members to reclaim the Empire. D-Mob knew all along that Blaze was the only one capable of following through with his plan and carrying out his vision for the crew's survival.
Just get out of here.
No way. You coming with us.
Leave me.
Forget it. Crow's gonna die for this.
No. Remember what I said. That ain't the way. Now get the hell out of here.
Come on. Let's go.
We got work to do.
Yeah, we're gonna hit Crow back tonight.
No way. That's exactly what he expects us to do. He'll be waiting.
What? So we just run away scared?
Do I look scared? No. But I ain't stupid either. We gotta do things the right way. D-Mob's way. We take Crow's turf by beating his fighters.
Yeah, you're crippled and half the crew's jumped town. Man, we gonna need some help.
Hey! What's going on?
D-Mob leaves the protagonist a voicemail urging him to listen to Blaze and trust his leadership. With D-Mob's words in mind, the remaining members of the crew begin to reclaim more of Crow's territories. After the protagonist takes down Lil Flip in the Gauntlet Arena, he, Blaze, and his girlfriend are seen walking through a parking lot. Blaze, pleased with his recent victories, can't help but smile, but the protagonist quietly wonders if their efforts are truly making a difference. Just then, Magic, Crow, and Dub C roll up, with Magic delivering a heated threat if the protagonist keeps taking Crow's turf. He'll end up 6 feet under. Refusing to let the disrespect slide, Magic challenges the protagonist right there in the parking lot. In a tense battle, the protagonist manages to come out on top, forcing Magic to retreat as he and the others drive off into the night.
Whooped that ass. Yo, what's up? Man, lighten up, man. The plan's working.
Is it? I mean, sure, we winning some fights, but how do we know we getting the Crow? So that's your ride, huh? No wonder you wanted this one so bad.
Hey, yo, shut up and listen, man. All right? Crow wants you to stay up out his clubs, B. That's it.
Or what?
Or we gonna give you a dirt nap.
Huh. You tell Crow, if he's tired of losing, maybe he should find himself a real fighter.
Oh, so you's a real fighter, huh? Let's see how well you do fighting on your own.
After the parking lot fight, Crow contacts the protagonist, warning him that Magic made a mistake, but that the advance he gave still stands. Back off or face serious consequences. Unfazed, the protagonist continues taking over Crow's turf, eventually defeating Mac 10. Just before his next fight with Exhibit, the protagonist is relaxing in his room with his girlfriend when someone bangs on the door. To his shock, it's Crow. Crow tries to buy him out, praising him as a winning fighter stuck on a losing team. But the protagonist refuses the offer and proceeds to defeat Exhibit in the ring. After securing a few more victories, he returns to his hideout. As he enters, Sticky sneaks up from behind and clocks him in the head with a bat, knocking him on the ground. Crow appears and delivers a chilling ultimatum: fight for him or his girlfriend will get hurt. Crow tells him that he's going to win back the clubs and put Crow's men back in power. This tragic twist marks the turning point of the story as the protagonist is forced to betray his crew, undergoing a heel turn that transforms him into the antagonist of the very empire he helped to build.
Hey, baby, you should have been there tonight. Oh!
Just thought I'd see if you had a chance to reconsider my offer.
I already told you my answer. Now get the hell out.
What if I were to sweeten the pot? What? You don't recognize your girl's hair when you see it? Chill, man. Your girl's alright. But if you want her to stay that way, you're gonna do what I say. And I say you fight for me now. You dig it? You're gonna win back my clubs and put my bosses back in place. Anyone asks, you had a change of heart, decide to make some real money. You say otherwise, the deal's off, and so is she.
See? He ain't so tough.
At this point in the story, the protagonist is seen as the villain. His name now appears on the opposite side of the fight card, and he no longer speaks or taunts at the start of his matches. D-Mob leaves a scathing voicemail, calling him a traitor, fighting under Crow's banner. The protagonist steadily wins back all of Crow's territories. The final place to conquer is Club 357, where he must face Doc. Before the fight, Blaze confronts him, trying to talk him out of it, telling him this isn't the way. In a moment of heartbreak, Blaze takes back D-Mob's chain from the protagonist. After defeating Doc, the protagonist confronts Crow, demanding the return of his girlfriend. But Crow has one final task for him. The protagonist rides with Crack to a junkyard, where they find Blaze being brutally beaten by Magic with a bat. Magic orders the protagonist to finish Blaze off, but in a sudden moment of loyalty and redemption, the protagonist turns on Crack and Magic, siding with Blaze instead. This betrayal leads to a 2-on-2 tag team match, with the protagonist fighting alongside Blaze to finally reunite with his girl and take a stand against Crow.
Well, well, well.
Where is she, man? Where is she?
Easy. You'll get your girl. First, I got one last job for you.
Forget it, Crow. A deal's a deal. Now give me my girl.
Whoa. You better check yourself right there, bitch. You in no position to be making demands. You wanna walk? That's fine. But you ever wanna see your girl again? You gonna do what I say. You got it?
Just one more thing you gotta do.
So this is it, huh?
Hold on to this. Finish him.
Perfect.
Stupid move.
Stupid move.
Yeah, he never was that bright.
Wanna jump off? Let's go.
After winning the tag match, the protagonist demands the location of his girlfriend for Magic. Magic reveals that she's being held in a factory building in Brooklyn. Racing against time, the protagonist drives there with the injured Blaze in the car. Upon arriving, he finds Sticky setting the building on fire while his girlfriend is tied up inside. The protagonist fights off Sticky, rescues his girlfriend, and escapes just in time. The confrontation with Crow is now inevitable. Crow, surrounded by his soldiers, faces growing dissent as some turn against him and leave his side. This leads to an intense clash between Crow's remaining soldiers and D-Mob's crew. The protagonist heads upstairs to confront Crow directly. As he makes his way up, Magic unexpectedly points a gun at him, but in a moment of clarity, he switches sides and hands over his pistol to the protagonist. Armed and ready, the protagonist takes on Crow in a final one-on-one battle. This epic showdown marks the beginning of the end for Crow's empire, which he once boasted he built on his own.
Crow, we gonna finish this right now.
Shit. You didn't actually think I'd let you go one-on-one with me, did you?
No, actually, I didn't.
That's it? You gonna take on my crew with this busted up fool? What you bitches waiting for? Get this trash up off my lawn. Move!
I'm out, man. He's your problem. Me too. I had enough of this.
Fine. You die too, motherfucker. Come on! Take all these bitches out!
We got this one.
We in this now, Crow.
Hey, man, what you waiting on? Shoot this fool! Now!
Hey, yo, you know what? Fuck this shit. It's all yours.
Looks like you got a morale issue there, brother.
come on, man. Ain't no need for this. Just join with me. I earned the city fair and square.
You broke the code.
Fuck the code. D-Mob was always talking that old school loyalty bullshit. You from the streets, you know there's only one code out here that matters. Ride or get rolled on. Hey, hold up.
You ain't even worth it.
After defeating Crow and watching his rival empire crumble, Blaze returns to meet up with the protagonist and hands back D-Mob's shit. The protagonist, now victorious and reunited with his girl, stands by the window, reflecting on the end of his terminal journey. This moment signifies the conclusion of the game's narrative and marking the end of the story and the restoration of balance.
Yo, thanks for backing me up, man.
Man, that's what it's all about. Hey, yo, I think you dropped something. Come on, man. Let's go.
Yeah, you go ahead. I'll just be a minute.
When we break the story down to its core elements, some intriguing narrative choices stand out. As a direct sequel to Def Jam Vendetta, Fight for New York builds upon the original story, giving us deeper insights into D-Mob's character. In the first game, D-Mob was the main antagonist. He was the ultimate villain. But in Fight for New York, he's given a redemption arc through a perspective shift, transforming him from a ruthless crime lord to someone who tries to prevent the violence from escalating with Crow. It's quite shocking considering how willing he was to eliminate the original hero in Vendetta. In this entry, D-Mob becomes a central figure at first, only to slowly fade into the background before being written out entirely. His arc is a fascinating change of pace for the character. Now, let's break down the key components of the story structure in Fight for New York. The 6 major elements are exposition, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. The exposition sets the stage for the narrative, introducing the setting, characters, and initial conflict. The game opens up with D-Mob getting arrested, only to be broken out, which establishes the underground, gritty, hip-hop influenced world of illegal fighting. We're introduced to the protagonist, our new hero, while setting up D-Mob's dangerous world. Next, we move into the conflict. This is where we meet the primary antagonist, Crow, voiced brilliantly by Snoop Dogg, who elevates Crow into a genuinely menacing villain. This conflict is a classic good versus evil setup, with 2 factions squaring off against each other. The story foreshadows Sticky's eventual betrayal, gradually escalating the tension between D-Mob and Crow, keeping players invested in the looming confrontation. The rising action follows as the protagonist wins fight after fight, helping D-Mob rebuild his empire. Crow then escalates things by challenging D-Mob's top fighter. Sticky's departure from D-Mob's crew adds to the tension as the narrative builds towards a showdown. Crow's sarcastic jabs at D-Mob about his moral standing hint at an eventual betrayal, setting the stage for a dramatic turning point. The climax is the story's peak, where the action hits the highest point. Interestingly, this game features 2 key climaxes. The first occurs when D-Mob is arrested following a drive-by shooting, leaving the protagonist and Blaze on their own. This shift of power turns the story into a much more violent affair. The second climax is Crow kidnapping the protagonist's girlfriend. This moment forces the protagonist to betray D-Mob's crew, turning him into a silent antagonist. He no longer taunts and fights, becoming eerily muted. The dramatic irony is strong here, as players understand the protagonist's motivation, while the rest of the characters remain in the dark. These twin climaxes drastically change the course of the story. As we move on to the falling action, the protagonist's fall from grace is evident. He's now fighting for Crow, building on the tension set by the dramatic irony of his betrayal. The falling action continues until he redeems himself by teaming up with Blaze after his fight with Doc. This arc feels like a descent before he finds his way back, all while tensions simmer beneath the surface. Finally, we arrive at the resolution. the conflicts reach their conclusion as the protagonist rejoins Blaze, takes down Sticky to save his girlfriend, and ultimately confronts and defeats Crow. The story ties up loose ends on a high note, capping off a well-structured narrative. What's particularly impressive is Method Man's involvement in crafting the story, which speaks volumes about the level of talent behind the scenes. Fight for New York's narrative is a testament to both EA and Method Man's skill in storytelling. Def Jam Fight for New York significantly expanded upon the gameplay mechanic of its predecessor Def Jam Vendetta, creating a more dynamic and engaging fighting experience. The game introduced a revolutionary 5-style fighting system allowing players to choose from street fighting, kickboxing, martial arts, wrestling, and submissions. This diverse range of fighting styles offer players unprecedented customization options, enabling them to create unique fighters tailored to their preferred playstyle. One of the most notable improvements over Vendetta was the introduction of the momentum meter and the blazing move system. As players landed successful attacks and taunted opponents, they built up momentum, which could be used to execute devastating special moves called blazing moves. This added a strategic layer to the combat as players had to carefully manage their momentum to turn the tide in battle. The game also introduced a more nuanced health system compared to Vendetta. In Fight for New York, depleting an opponent's health bar didn't automatically result in a knockout. Instead, it put them in the danger zone, where they become vulnerable to specific knockout attacks. This mechanic added tension to fights, allowed for dramatic comebacks, and making battles more unpredictable and exciting than in Vendetta. Environmental interaction was another significant improvement for Fight for New York. The game featured interactive arenas with breakable objects and crowd participation. Players could use their surroundings to their advantage, slamming opponents into walls or using objects as weapons. This level of interactivity was absent in Vendetta and added a new dimension to the fighting experience. Fight for New York also introduced a robust character customization system, allowing players to create their own unique fighters. This feature was a major step up from Vendetta, as it enabled players to personalize their experience and invest more deeply in their character's journey through the story mode. The ability to unlock new moves, clothing, and accessories further enhanced the sense of progression and replayability. The game offers a diverse array of gameplay modes, significantly expanding upon its predecessor. The game's primary mode is the story mode, which follows the journey of a player-created character through the underground fighting scene of New York City. This mode is notably more engaging than Vendetta's, featuring a branching narrative and incorporating voice messages and text from other characters to enhance the storytelling experience. Beyond the story mode, Fight for New York boasts 10 different gameplay modes, providing players with a variety of ways to enjoy the game's combat system. While some of these modes aren't essentially standard fights in specific arenas, such as the Inferno match that takes place inside of a ring of fire, others offer unique gameplay experiences. For instance, the game includes multiplayer options like 4-player free-for-all and team matches, which feature a more distant camera angle to accommodate multiple fighters in one arena. Although the game lacks online or local access network options, its local multiplayer modes add significant replay value. The variety of characters and arenas ensures that these modes remain fresh and entertaining over time. Each mode is designed to be enjoyable, and the game's balanced roster means that players can potentially win with any fighter they choose. It's worth noting that Fight for New York's gameplay modes are complemented by its improved fighting mechanics. The last thing to talk about is the roster, featuring a mix of real-life hip-hop artists, actors, and original characters. The game's lineup includes many notable names from the music industry and entertainment world. Now, this is about to be a long list, but bear with me for a moment. From D-Mob's crew, we have D-Mob, Method Man is Blaze, Redman is Doc, Sticky Fingers is Sticky, Capone, Comp, Eric Sherman, Flavor Flav, Freeway, Ghostface Killer, Henry Rollins, Joe Budden, Ludacris, Memphis Bleak, Nori, Scarface, and Dub C. Moving on to Crow's crew, we have Snoop Dogg as Crow, Baby Chris, Bless, Busta Rhymes as Magic, Fat Joe as Crack, Danny Trejo as Trejo, Bone Crusher, Bubba Sparks, Crazy Leg, David Banner, Elephant Man, Famlay, Havoc, Ice-T, Lil Flip, Mac 10, Omar Epps is OE, Prodigy, Sean Paul, Slick Rick, Warren G, and Exhibit. Lastly, the girlfriends. You got Carmen Electra, Cindy J, Kimura, Lil Kim, and Shawana. One of the unique aspects of the game is that many of these characters are voiced by their real-life counterparts. adding authenticity to the experience. The diverse roster allows players to engage in fantasy matchups between various hip-hop stars and celebrities, contributing to the gameplay's appeal and replay value. It's worth noting that the game also includes a character creation feature allowing players to create their own custom fighter to use in the story mode and other game modes. This custom character can be tailored with different fight styles, appearances, and clothing options, further expanding the game's roster and personalization options. Def Jam 5 from New York was released on September 21st, 2004 for the Sony PlayStation 2, Nintendo GameCube, and the Microsoft Xbox. The PlayStation 2 version of 5 from New York took full advantage of the console's hardware capabilities, delivering smooth gameplay and impressive graphics for its time. The game's character models were detailed and accurately represented the real-life hip-hop artists and celebrities featured in the roster. The environments were also well rendered, with interactive elements that added depth to the fighting experience. One of the strengths of the PlayStation 2 port was its loading times, which were relatively quick for the era. This allowed players to jump into fights and navigate menus with minimum waiting, enhancing the overall game experience. The PS2's DualShock 2 controller also provided precise control over the fighters, allowing players to execute complex moves and combos with ease. The PlayStation 2 version of 5 from New York included all the features of its counterparts on other platforms, such as the extensive story mode, various gameplay modes, and the robust character customization system. It also supported multiplayer gameplay through the PS2's multi-tap accessory, allowing up to 4 players to engage in brutal brawls simultaneously. Due to the PlayStation 2's large install base at the time, this version of 5 from New York reached a wide audience and contributed significantly to the game's popularity and legacy. Many fans still regard the PS2 port as the definitive version of Def Jam 5 from New York, and it remains a sought-after title for collectors and enthusiasts of the console. The GameCube version of 5 from New York remained largely the same, but there were some notable differences. The GameCube version of 5 from New York generally maintained a smooth frame rate and featured crisp visuals. Due to the GameCube's unique hardware architecture, some graphical elements may have appeared slightly different compared to the PS2 and Xbox versions, but overall, the visual quality was on par with its counterparts. The GameCube used proprietary mini DVDs with less storage capacity than the PS2 and Xbox discs. This limitation might have resulted in a slightly compressed audio or reduced video quality for cutscenes in the GameCube version to fit the game onto a single disc. Due to the GameCube's efficient disc reading capabilities, loading times in the GameCube version were generally quick, often comparable to or better than the PS2 version. The Xbox version of 5 from New York generally offers slightly improved graphics compared to the PS2 and GameCube versions. Thanks to the Xbox's more powerful hardware, the character models and environments were often crispier and more detailed on the Xbox. One of the most significant advantages of the Xbox version was its online multiplayer functionality. Unlike the PS2 and GameCube versions, Xbox players could compete against each other online through Xbox Live, expanding the game's multiplayer options beyond local play. The Xbox version generally featured faster loading times compared to the PS2 version, though they were compatible to the GameCube's quick load times. The Xbox's larger storage capacity meant that the game could potentially include higher quality audio and video content compared to the more storage-limited GameCube version. In addition to online play, the Xbox version supported System Link, allowing players to connect multiple Xbox consoles for local network multiplayer sessions. While the core gameplay, story, and features remain consistent across all versions, these aspects made the Xbox port of Def Jam 5 from New York stand out, particularly for its online capabilities and slightly enhanced visual performance. Moving on to Def Jam 5 from New York, The Takeover, which was released on August 29, 2006, exclusively for the Sony PSP. It serves as both a prequel and a port of the original Def Jam 5 from New York. The Takeover retains much of the core gameplay and features of its predecessor, while adapting the experience for the handheld platform. As a prequel, the Takeover story takes place before the events of 5 from New York. It follows the player's custom as they rise through the ranks of New York's underground fighting scene, eventually crossing paths with D-Mob and other familiar characters from the original game. This narrative approach allows players to experience the origins of some key storylines and character relationships. The game preserves the 5-style fighting system from 5 from New York, allowing players to mix and match between street fighting, kickboxing, martial arts, wrestling, and submissions. However, due to the PSP's hardware limitations, the TakeOver featured slightly scaled down visuals and fewer interactive elements in the fighting environments compared to its console counterpart. One of the main differences in the TakeOver is the roster of playable characters. While it retains many of the hip-hop artists and celebrities from Fight for New York, some characters are absent, and a few new ones are introduced. This change in the lineup offers a slightly different experience for players familiar with the original game. The TakeOver also includes some new features tailored for portable play. It introduces a crew battle mode where players can create and manage their own crew of fighters. Additionally, the game supports local multiplayer through the PSP ad hoc functionality, allowing players to compete against each other on separate devices. Despite these differences, Def Jam Fight for New York The Takeover maintains the essence of the original game, offering an engaging blend of hip-hop culture and brutal street fighting. It successfully adapts the Fight for New York experience for on-the-go gaming while providing additional content that expands on the Def Jam fighting game universe. When Def Jam Fight for New York first hit the scene in 2004, it was like dropping a surprise mixtape that had everyone talking. Critics and players alike were blown away by how much the game improved on its predecessor, Def Jam Vendetta. The buzz around Fight for New York was intense. Reviewers were throwing out high scores left and right, with X-Play giving it a solid 4 out of 5. GameSpot was particularly impressed, praising the game for leveling up almost every aspect from the original. They were all about the new fighting styles, the character creation, and how you could interact with weapons and environments. It was like the developers had been listening to every fan's wish list and checked off all of the boxes. Graphics-wise, Fight for New York was turning heads. Both IGN and GameSpot were calling the visuals impressive, which was high praise back in 2004. The game was so good that GameSpot even crowned it the best GameCube game of September 2004. That's no small feat considering the competition at the time. But it wasn't just about looking pretty. The game's depth caught a lot of people by surprise. The Sydney Morning Herald gave it 4 out of 5 stars, saying it had the deepest story ever seen in a fighter. That's not something you hear every day about a fighting game, right? The game's popularity wasn't just a flash in the pan either. It got nominated for Fighting Game of the Year at the 8th Annual Interactive Achievement Awards, going toe-to-toe with some heavy hitters at the time. Def Jam Fight for New York has left an impressive legacy in the gaming world, and its reputation has only grown stronger over time. Today, it is widely regarded as a cult classic and one of the best fighting games of its era. Nearly 20 years after its release, Fight for New York is still fondly remembered by fans and critics alike. It is often cited as the pinnacle of the Def Jam video game series, outshining both its predecessor and successors. The game's unique blend of hip-hop culture, over-the-top fighting mechanics, and star-studded roster has cemented its place in gaming history. In recent years, there's been a surge in nostalgia for Fight for New York. You'll find numerous YouTube videos, Reddit threads, and gaming articles praising the game, calling for a remake or remaster. This new interest was highlighted when streetwear brand Supreme released a t-shirt inspired by the game in their fall/winter 2023 collection, which sold out almost instantly. The game's influence can be seen in later titles that attempted to blend hip-hop culture with gaming, though many argue that none have quite captured the magic of Fight for New York. Its absence from modern platforms due to licensing issues has only added to its mystique, making it something of a lost classic that can easily be replayed on current hardware. Today, Fight for New York is often held up as an example of innovative game design, particularly in how it seamlessly integrated celebrity personalities into its gameplay and story. It's also praised for its deep customization options and environmental interactions, features that were ahead of their time. In the eyes of many gamers and hip-hop fans, Def Jam Fight for New York represents a unique moment in time when gaming and hip-hop culture collided in spectacular fashion. Its legacy lives on as a beloved artifact of the early 2000s pop culture, and a game that many still hope will one day make a triumphant return as they tease it all the time in Twitter posts. We all just hope this game can get either a remake or a proper continuation of the story. Fight for New York, in my opinion, is a game that I really wish I played during its prime. To be honest, I was much more familiar with Vendetta, so playing Fight for New York for the first time for this channel was a fresh experience. And I've gotta say, this game is miles ahead of the original in terms of style, story, and overall vibe. We've really got to give credit to Kevin Liles and Josh Holmes for trying something new and pushing the boundaries. Who would have thought that a game about rappers brawling would work so well? I know I've said it before, but the story here deserves a lot of praise. It's not the greatest story ever told, but it follows a strong narrative structure that makes it engaging. Having real-life artists step into a video game adds a level of authenticity that few games can match. While Vendetta had some of that, this sequel took it to the next level, delivering the update fans were waiting for. Sometimes sequels fail to live up to the hype, but Fight for New York knew exactly what it needed to do. After playing a few matches, I was genuinely impressed with the gameplay. The controls are pretty similar to Vendetta, but they've definitely been refined. Within minutes, I was wrecking the computer opponent, and I loved every second of it. The wrestling roots are still there with the grappling mechanics, while some of the arenas are still wrestling rings. It doesn't feel out of place. What really takes it up a notch is the interactive environments. You're no longer just stuck in the ring. Now you've got walls, platforms, cars, and more to use to your advantage. The graphics, I was blown away. I could talk about the graphics alone for hours, but I'll keep it short. The character models are spot on. Snoop Dogg looks exactly like Snoop. Busta Rhymes is unmistakable, and Fat Joe, you get the idea. That said, the crowd, not so much. It doesn't look nearly as polished as it does in the box art. It's still a bit disappointing that the crowd didn't get the same level of detail as the rappers, and some of the arenas are too dark, which make it tough to see what's happening when you're getting thrown into the crowd. The weapons are decent, but they could have used a bit more shine. Things like shovels and beer bottles feel a little flat. But what really stands out is the facial damage during fights. Blood splatters on the ground and it stays there, giving the battles a gritty, visceral feel. From the moment you start playing this game, it's a blast, although the excitement does dip a bit after you finish the story mode. That said, it's a perfect game to pick up with a few friends for a full-weight battle and see who's left standing. Beyond the story mode though, that's where the replayability starts to fade. But that doesn't take away from how great this game is. Even in solo play, I had a lot of fun and I truly enjoyed my time with it. It's a shame the game doesn't get the respect it deserves. While other games have had remakes, Fight for New York is still stuck in the 6th generation of gaming, which honestly hurts. Out of 10, I'd give this game a solid 8. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Hit the notification bell to stay up to date on all our latest uploads. If you have any retrospective requests or suggestions, feel free to drop them in the comment section down below. This is the Retro Phantom, signing out.